Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month.
That oh so polite Commonwealth Club applause.
Never. Like, I think we're going to be well behaved.
Well known as the Commonwealth Club golf clap.
You have to hit them with the "I can't hear you." It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's Commonwealth Club event. My name is Carvel Wallace. I'm an author, podcaster, and your moderator for tonight's discussion. It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers, W. Kamau Bell and Kate Schatz, the authors of Do the Work, an anti-racist activity book. W. Kamau Bell is a socio-political comedian and host and executive producer of the Emmy Award-winning CNN docuseries The United Shades of America with W. Kamau Bell. He also directed and executive produced the 4-part Showtime documentary We Need to Talk About Cosby. Last time the word Cosby will be followed by applause. He is an ACLU artist ambassador for racial justice and serves on the board of the directors for Donors Choose and the advisory board of Hollaback. Kate Schatz is an activist and best-selling author of the Rad Woman book series. She is the co-founder of Solidarity Sundays, a nationwide network of over 200 feminist groups. And Kate is also an educator and has taught women's studies, literature, creative writing at UC Santa Cruz, San Jose State, Rhode Island College, and Brown University.
Ooh, wow.
And a quick reminder to those of you in our audience, if you're here with us in San Francisco and you have a question for Kamau or Kate, please write it on the question cards that you have been given. And if you're watching along with us online, wherever you are, please put your questions in the text chat on YouTube, and we'll get to them when we are about 15 minutes left in the program. So first, let's give a warm round of welcome to Kamau and Kate. All right. So I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so excited by this book, and I'm going to have to ask questions that everyone has asked you, which is, so I apologize in advance, but this book is written like, it's written like a scholastic activity book, like when you take your kid to the dentist and you're like, here, let's figure out what to do, let's solve this maze. But in this one, you're like, let's solve the maze of like white supremacy. And I wonder what went into you guys taking that approach to this book, this activity workbook, kind of like almost children's book approach. Mm-hmm. How'd you get there?
No one's asked that question yet.
Oh, really?
No, I'm just kidding.
You had me.
When we decided to write a book together, and it was Kamau's idea to write a book, and I said yes, because why would I not say yes to that, especially during the pandemic, when everything was really wild, and also kind of boring and monotonous. So he suggested that we write a book, and we got on a Zoom call together to brainstorm, and we wanted to do something around anti-racism. This is right in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, and I had the idea for an activity book, and so did you.
I had the idea for an activity book.
And so did I.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. We both were like, I have a crazy idea.
Yeah.
And we both had the crazy idea of activity book.
And I think that had come to me at some point, and I thought that it was ridiculous and that he would think that was ridiculous, and then he also had that idea. And I think a lot of it was that it was during the pandemic, and we're both parents of young kids. So we were home with our kids, and we had been for months. And I felt like I was so up close and personal with my kids and watching them struggle on Zoom and being in the same room as I tried to work and hearing the teachers trying to engage them, and was just really thinking, like, how do you get how do you get people, how do you get kids to do work that they don't want to do, right? Like you make it fun, you make it a game, like you get them to do math by putting rocket ships, and it's a whole thing. And then it's like, how do we get all these adults to grapple with white supremacy and what you can actually do about it? Because, how can we get their attention? So we can use these activities.
Yeah, and I think, and connected to that was after the murder of George Floyd, all these anti-racist books went to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and we had this sort of conversation about like, okay, people are buying them, but are they going to read them? And and even if you do buy them and read them, do you know what to do next? And so I think that and there's a lot of great books out there. I mean, and so I think it was just the idea of like, I know from United Shades and your work as an activist that you want to explain the problem to people, but you also want to get people to the work, to the homework, to the solving of the problem. And so it was like, how do we connect them from these books to the work, or could this be a way into those books that when you read them, you have a bigger context for how to solve these problems?
By show of hands, how many people in this room bought an anti-racist book in the year 2020? Everyone's hands all the way up. How many of you read from the beginning of the book to the end of the book in its completion? Keep your hand up.
How many of you are lying?
How many of you are lying? Keep your hand up. No, I think that's right, and I think that there's this thing about racism. I mean, that's what struck me about the book, is that you're like, let's make racism fun, or like dealing with racism fun, not racism itself.
I mean, to be clear, my whole career has been about making racism.
Well, no, that's my point, though. So like, okay, so I have a 19-year-old son, and I have this experience that I want to share that came up to me when I was reading this book, which is that I showed him the Chappelle Show for the first time, like the old one from the Bush era. And as a 19-year-old Gen Z, like activist, like was organizing protests, was out in the streets, he watched like 20 minutes of the Chappelle Show and said, boy, Dad, this is so weird, because they're like, it's funny to them, this stuff about racism. And it just dawned on me, oh wow, because he's born in 2003, he's from a place where there's not a lot of fun around, you can't make jokes about it. And everyone here is reacting like that's a bad thing, which it may or may not be. But it was interesting to me that when I was reading your book, it was coming from the perspective of like, there's a certain playfulness, like, let's actually make this not a big thing. And so that just had my wheels turning about, and I want to hear you guys talk about this, like, why do you think it's become so serious? Why are there so few playful approaches to racism in 2020 compared to, say, 2003 or 1995 or what have you?
As the comedian expert, I'll handle this one, Kate.
Yeah.
No, I think there is a lot of fun around racism. It's just some of that fun is not helpful. I think social media and the internet, like, we can pull up some memes, is actually like, it's all coming from all sides. It is like, there's just a sense of like, that it used to be you could have a very curated experience of your content, because there was like only a certain number of channels. You only watched those channels. You didn't watch the other channels, so that you didn't see the other stuff. Now, especially if you're 19, you're seeing everything at all times. And so there's just a sense that there's a lot more to wade through. And the way that the internet works, we're generally more activated by things we don't like than things we like.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing the stuff you don't like at a higher rate maybe than you're seeing the stuff that you do like. So I feel like for me the idea is that there's a lot of stuff out there, but there's just almost so much stuff that you can't, that it keeps us all in a state of like anxiety, of like, all the time.
Right.
And so I think that like, and part of this is also, I think like, so many things that we're experiencing now is because we're all sort of walking around surrounded by the ghosts of COVID. And we're all sort of like, time to get back to normal, everybody. And so we're all raw. And I think so the idea of this, but the only way to like, I learned as being a comedian, is if people are laughing, they're actually, they're paying attention. So and I'm not smart enough to write a serious book about racism, but if I were to, you can sort of pretend to be paying along to serious things and nobody knows if you're paying attention or not. But with something like this, if we make you laugh and engage, you will keep turning the page. Hopefully you'll connect to the work in a different way. So for me, I don't think people are always like, how do you sit down and make racism funny? I don't sit down to try to make racism funny. I make racism funny to survive.
And I would add that I think that for white people in particular, I mean, it's it's terrifying, the idea of being playful and making jokes about racism. I mean, we're not supposed to. That's not, don't do that. I would not write this book by myself. I would not, as a white person, I would not write a funny, playful activity book about racism on my own. I mean, this was a partnership, and what I appreciated is being able to use humor to, I think, hopefully engage white people and like bring them into something, because I think humor is so effective, exactly what Kamau said, because people are getting it, they're engaging, people let their guard down. And I think a lot of the defensiveness and the anxiety that a lot of white people have around talking about this, that they can, I think that they can engage and they can kind of relax and approach it in a different way. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that and to use the playfulness. And I think that throughout the book, we're always kind of like, we're walking a lot of really fine lines and kind of jumping back and forth. Right. And I think it's what enables us to have really, really serious moments. And we were always interested in that play between, there'll be like a crossword puzzle, and then you'll turn the page and it's like a really serious, intense conversation about police violence.
Right. Well, I feel like when I grew up, I feel like for me and my family, yes, we made, like, racism was the source of humor because it was a way we survived. Everyone made jokes about it. We cracked each other up with various stories. And I wonder, I guess part of what I want to hear about is like each of your personal processes with like getting to the point of, and I'm sorry I have to say this word, I'm just using it because it actually works, wokeness. Like each of your processes with like how, because none of us are born this way. So how did you personally get to a point where you felt like you had something helpful to offer to the world about how to overcome your particular privileges? In 3 minutes or less.
You mean in life, not just in the book? In life. I was raised with what is called a black mom. She's here tonight. Give it up for my mom sitting here. Sometimes she stands. She's not standing tonight. And I always say, like, I was born in the early 70s, and I feel like that, when people talk about the post-racial of the Obama era, I feel like the 70s was like actually there was another post-racial era, because it was, weirdly, we thought the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. meant racism was over. And so it was this sense of like, oh, the civil rights era fixed everything, and now everything's. And so I grew up with this sort of like, eracism, all those sort of fun things. Right. And then I turned like 13 and was like 6 feet tall, and it was like, and I was out in the world in Chicago, and it was like, oh no, there's still racism. Right. And so for me, like, I have a mom who was born in Indianapolis in the, can I say in the 30s? In the 30s. And like had lived through, like, I always say my mom lived through all the black stuff from history except for slavery. Right. Like, that was the one thing but everything else she's lived through. And so I heard these stories from her and thought, man, that was the past. Oh, you guys really did a lot of things. And then, but as a teenager growing up in the world, realizing, oh, racism is still here. And so I had somebody I could go to every day and talk to about this stuff, so it was, and also our family business was literally like, she collected books of famous black quotations. So blackness was just the wallpaper of the house. And I used to have a joke I did in my act that I was 11 years old before I realized that a cracker was also a delicious snack. Not everybody gets that, but it's a good joke. And so it was just like, and also hearing black people rant about racism and then laugh about it in the same breath. So for me, it wasn't so much about like, and then I moved to the Bay Area, and my mind, like in the late 90s, my mind went of just like like in Chicago, at that time felt like a very black and white world, and then coming out here, it felt like there's a lot more going on than that. I was like, Filipinos, I never really even knew that was a thing. Seriously, I came back, I just didn't know. So, and then it becomes about like, for me, it's not so much about, it's about learning in real time in front of an audience. So that's what United Shades is about. A lot of this book is either Kate sharing things with me or a collaborator sharing things. It's about like showing the process of like, you can learn, it doesn't have to be painful, and then you can figure out how to do things better. And that's, so I don't even think about like as like showing people how to showing people how to be good or whatever, or showing them how to overcome. It's like, no, I'm in this world too, trying to figure out how to try to get to the next era, hopefully that's better than this one. And I realize my role is to do it in real time in front of people.
Can you talk a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, it made me realize, like, to connect to the last question about using humor and playfulness. I think that I grew up in the Bay Area, and I was kind of like that woke activist kid from a really early age. And I didn't come from an activist family. And I grew up in San Jose. I did not grow up in like an activist community by any means. I think I always say animal rights and the environment were my gateway drugs to activism. It was like, I was really into trees and like against animal testing when I was in 6th grade. But I was also a kid who I really loved the news. I loved current events. I just like was really interested in what was going on. And I was probably in high school when I started to connect the environmental work that I was doing to racial justice. And I had a lot of classic Bay Area woke experiences. I went to UC Santa Cruz, and I basically learned what everybody fears their kid will learn. I became like a women's studies major, and I read Angela Davis, and I understood the intersection of race, class, gender, and power. And that was it. I got to study with incredible people, et cetera. But I think one thing that I was always doing from a young age, because I'm thinking of your son growing up in this time, like I was the only kid that cared about this stuff in my school. And I was constantly trying to get other people to give a shit. Like that was like my thing, was like, come recycle with me, come to this march, come do this thing, like sign this petition about redwoods. Like I was so earnest, and I was really angry. And I think but I realized early on that if I was gonna get other people to care, I had to not just be angry, I had to not just be super serious, and I needed to use my kind of social skills. And one of my skills, I think, is a sense of humor. I'm a confident speaker, and I'm creative. So I could kind of use those things to try to get other people at my high school or my middle school or, in my community to engage and care. So I think I've always been interested in like different techniques for engagement. How do we get an audience? How do we get people? And I think about this, I taught high school, how do you get a bunch of teenagers to give a shit about what you're saying? Like you've got to make stuff interesting. I think about that as a parent. How do I get my kids to listen to me? You have to be creative. So I think from an early age, I was very woke, very serious, very passionate, but knew that I needed to figure out ways to get people to kind of come along with me.
Well, it's interesting because it feels to me, and we were talking about this a little bit backstage, that we're at a time where there is, I think, a fairly significant backlash to wokeness, both as a concept, and that's part of what it is that turning it into this caricature, but also the actual process of engaging in the world with an attempt to bring about care and an attempt to have like shared care for all people, that in and of itself is experiencing tremendous backlash. And I remember having to explain to my kids exactly what happened the night of November 9th, 2016, and that was, or November 8th, whatever that was, and they were, 10 and 12 at that point. And from that point forward, it's like I had to keep explaining, there are people who don't actually want everyone to care about everyone, and now they have a lot of power, and they want to make sure that like there's not too much caring going on. You know what I mean? Like we got to limit the amount of caring that's going down. And so having to just like live under those auspices, and it makes me wonder how you maintain optimism in your work, given the size and force of the counter work.
It's funny when you said explain to your kids. You have because my kids are younger than yours, so I have a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And on the night of the midterms, I had to explain to my 10-year-old, my 8-year-old, Herschel Walker. Wait, he's black, but he's against Black Lives Matter? Oh, it gets worse than that, Sam. You think that's a problem? He also thinks China's stealing our good air. So it's those same conversations, but I feel like, so for me, like, humor is the way I lighten the load, but I couldn't say that I would define myself currently as an optimist. But certainly without humor, I don't get out of bed in the morning. Like I don't get, without humor and my kids needing to get to school. But like, it's like I don't know how I would be able to like walk through the world without a sense of irony and a sense of humor and a sense of sarcasm. Because just to sort of keep my own spirits up. But I think optimism is like, I mean, if you are, good, thank you. But I really find that like the only way I could even sort of point towards optimism is if I do the work and as if I do create work in the world that I feel like is productive. You know, I always joke that like one day I'm going to just make a documentary about noodles. We aren't like in a good enough place as a society for me to do that. It's like, so I have to make documentaries about the hard things. So yeah, I just don't think that like, optimism is definitely. I was thinking when my mom handed me the black baton, and it was lighter than when it was handed to her. Like she's like, we did a lot. Can you? And I feel like we're in danger of me handing my kids the black baton, and it's going to be heavier. So I really feel like it's like, so optimism is like, I definitely. It's funny, Kate. This happened again. I'm going to tell a story that you've heard before, but it's the second time it's happened. I was at the gym. I was in the room, in the locker room, naked. Person walks up to me. Oh my God, it's W. Kamau Bell. This is what happens. And they go, you know, so much is going on. I don't know. Should I just feel so nervous about everything. Are things as bad as I think they are? Yeah. Like, that's my answer. Like, it's like, and it may be worse than you think it is. So, like, we can't sort of, people always want me to tell them that, like, no, I've traveled around and really people just hug more. That used to think that way. But then that night happened, you talked about your kids. I recognize how dire things are right now. And so the only time optimism comes in is if I feel like we're actually doing the work. I like that this side is trying to start applause breaks and the rest is like, we're not sure yet, but I appreciate that. I appreciate that this side, or like one or two people on that side. There's some of this, I hear some of that, yeah.
I'm really excited for your documentary about noodles, though.
I am too.
I will watch that.
Coming 2097.
I mean, I don't do any of this, because I'm an optimist. Right? Like I do it because if I am an optimist, I'd say I'm a really practical optimist, but my motivation is not optimism. I do this and I engage with this work because I think I absolutely have to. I mean, maybe, I feel like a realist. I see what's going on in this world. I mean, I think there's no other option. So this isn't, for me, like being activism and writing a book like this and having these conversations, it's not because I'm like hopeful, I believe in some like beautiful, magical future. It's because I actually see what's going on around us. And I think it's my, my obligation, my duty, like a necessary thing. And I think, but to the question of like, how do I, and I get this too, like, how do I go about the day? How do I move forward? I mean, one, I don't really have a choice. And I do think having kids makes it like, like they're cute, they're funny, they still believe in a beautiful, magical future. And I really want that for them. But I also think that because I've written a lot and studied a lot of history, I think about that a lot. I pay attention to American history. I study it, I write about it, I think about it, and I think it's so important to have that historical perspective and that long view, to be able to kind of see the moment we're in as one in a series of moments, and that sometimes that just actually makes people feel really horrible, like when you think about how far we actually have not come, or how cyclical our patterns and our this world is. But I also think it's kind of it's humbling. It's like thinking about how we're all just like microscopic specks in this like vast universe, right? Like we're in this one particular moment and like a large, a huge series of particular horrific moments in this country's history, and it's instructive, and I think it can also just be, for me, it's humbling when I get too overwhelmed and obsessed with thinking like we're in the worst moment ever. And I think about that with elections, just all the rhetoric around. I feel like every
democracy's on the ballot.
It's like I know every election has been really important, but this one right here is and it's like there's a lot of truth to that, and I'm not saying I don't want to downplay how horrific our moment is, but we've been in a lot of horrific moments, and there are there's a lot to be kind of gained from thinking and studying that.
Well, it kind of ties into something that I've been thinking about with both of you, which is the way your previous work is like prepared you for this book. And Kamal, you talked a little bit about like going around the country and talking to people and how, everyone wants you to say, well, because there is this kind of like cottage industry of certain people, I'm not going to name any names, going around and saying like, oh, everyone's the same, we just need hugs, and I think people get paid a lot of money to say that. And but
some of them don't though, which is crazy.
That's a whole other story. But you, Kate, like those books, the Rad Women books were such a fixture in my household and with my kids. And it makes me wonder, like you spent so much time studying like people throughout history who worked against tremendous odds. And I wonder how spending time with those women, like both helps you in general and shows up for you in this book in specific.
Oh, so much. So for folks who don't know, I wrote a series of books with Miriam Klein-Stahl about kind of remarkable women from history and today, Rad American Women and Rad Women Worldwide, and they're for young readers. So they're short kind of capsule biographies of with a focus on women whose stories we don't often hear, and women of color, people from marginalized communities who did really remarkable things, and in the face of just like tremendous opposition and horror and brutality. And so that is a huge, anytime, I'm like, if they can, it sounds cliche, but like if they can do it, I can handle this. We can make it through this particular moment. And I actually remember when I was working on Rad Women Worldwide, I was really stuck. Like I was having like a writer's block moment. I was overwhelmed. I have a deadline. I was like, I don't think I can finish this story. And it was one about like Marie Curie and her daughter Irene and the work that they did, specifically about the work they did together on the battlefields of World War I. And Irene Curie's like 17 years old, and she's like this French teenager, and she's dragging her mom's X-ray machine onto these battlefields to try to convince these military generals to use this machine, and there's like people dying around her. And then I'm reading the letters that she's writing to her mom, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good.
Like I could probably do this.
I can write 2 more paragraphs. Like I'm fine. So I mean, for me, that kind of stuff it's instructive because you can actually think about the strategies that people used and their approaches and how they did things. But it's also just like immensely humbling. And come on, who am I to complain? Like, look at what these people have done.
Right. What was difficult for each of you in writing this book?
That it couldn't be like 10,000 pages long. I think there were so many things that we just were like that. It was like we constantly kept trying to every final draft that came from the publisher. We're like, well, one more thing, and so it was just that we couldn't. There's just so many different angles you want to get in here, and so many different ways, and also so much more information. And the problem with being trying to have an intersectional approach is you can't be intersectional enough at some point. Like you're like, do we get, so I think the fact that it couldn't be, I mean, it was supposed to be whatever it is, it's longer than it was supposed to be. It was longer than it was like it was supposed to be like 150 and it was like 172 pages or something. So, but that it just couldn't do everything we needed it to do. I think at some point you just have to at some point I do this with all my work. At some point it's just due and you have to turn it in, and you're like a little bit, you're like, I hope they're grading on effort, because that you put the effort in. And so like at some point I feel like with all the work I'm just like, hopefully the audience will feel, not that you want to look like it was worked over, but will feel the care and the attempt, because that can be a part of the judgment too.
Another thing, I think one thing that was really hard for me, like I just said, my other books have really been about history and have been about things that already happened, right? And, not that those matters are settled by any means, and I like reflecting on, how those histories have impacted where we are today. But this book was very much in real time. I mean, we always tell the story that we had a huge deadline on January 6th.
Wow.
We did not meet that deadline, people.
It's funny you don't have to say the year.
Right?
It's become like one of those dates, like January 6th. Ugh. Yeah.
And so when we were writing, we wrote this book, basically like fall 2020, and then like the first half of 2021, and it was like during the we wrote it when we were unvaccinated. We were wearing masks, and we wanted to write outside, but the fires were happening, the air quality was too bad, and our kids were still home, and but also just as the news and the world just kept happening as we were writing. So that was a challenge to really want to feel really timely, and it was just like things would happen, and we'd be like, God, that's got to go in the book.
Yeah, like there's a January 6th happened at some point. Like, we need a January 6th reference in here, and you're flipping through the book. Where can it go? Oh, there it goes. And so there is one in there. But yeah, like I always, just the nature of the way that I work, it's always about like topical. So for me, it's like there's always a sense to try to make it feel as relevant as possible. And that's why I really appreciated Kate. Now, you said your books are for young readers. As an adult, I take offense at that. Because when I read your book to my young reader, I was like, oh, whoa, all right.
That's the point. That's one of my strategies.
They're for young readers or adults who like bite-sized things. Yeah. It's like woke BuzzFeed. Is that a thing to say? No, but it's so like for me, I just want people to, if you don't have to have kids to really get a lot out of her books. And so yeah, I think for me it was just about like always trying to. Knowing, I think for me, I always have. There's two. I'm thinking about the audience that the book is, that we're the core audience, and then we also talk a lot about the audience of our friends who are activists who are actually doing the work, who are going to pick this up and be like, what did these two do?
Yeah.
So we're always thinking about like wanting our friends to pick it up and go. They may not need this as much as the core audience, but hopefully they will. We want them to respect it.
Well, I mean, who is the book for? I mean, I know that everyone always says my book is for everyone. But you're not. You can't say that.
No.
So who is the book truly for? Like,
this book is for white people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone, all white people.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, very specifically, I think this book is for white people who want to know what to do. It's for white people who like know something's kind of wrong, like who know that there's racism.
Their spidey sense is going on.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe there's like a spectrum, right? And this is, I appreciate the nuance of that question. Like, not all white people are the same. We have some things in common, but like but like I don't think of this as like, because I think I always feel the poor maligned uncle at Thanksgiving, right? That trope. Like people are always like, what do I say to my, my MAGA uncle? Like this book is not really for your MAGA uncle. Like I think there's a lot of people that are really, really dug in, right? Like this, I don't think this book is like gonna change, maybe he'd like it, I don't know, but I think of this book, as for it is for people who know what's going on, who see it, but like don't really know what to do, like, right, can't make sense of it.
Yeah, and I think that we say that, but it's also like, as a black person who worked on this book, I learned a lot working on this book. So, but I think we want to be clear that like there's a really sort of 101 approach to this book that everybody can go back and be an expert in something and take the 101 class and go, oh, I've some things I learned here, or I forgot about that I learned. But it is really for people who, no matter what, who had that moment in 2020 when the racial reckoning was happening and there were the marches in the streets, and you're like, and you thought that turning your Instagram square black was the battle. Or you thought that like buying the book and putting it next to your bedstand was the battle, or reading the book that because now we're in this thing where like there's so many corporations who were like sort of put up Black Lives Matter things in 2020 that they have looked back and gone and go, they didn't do anything with the money they raised, they didn't do this, they've also contributed to causes that are directly against the idea of Black Lives Matter. So for me, it's like that was the season of woke, but that season has passed, as we see. Just yesterday, 36 Republican senators voted against making like marriage equality and interracial marriage the law of the land. 36. Yeah. And if you look at the list of 36 senators, many of them are the Republican senators who we were told are like the new breed. Right. So it's, thank you for the I'm sorry, God, we got a San Francisco hiss. But like, so this is like, the barbarians are at the gate, the call's coming from inside the house, whatever else you can say, it's happening in real time. Like this is not a theory. This is like, this and other things are part of the work. And if we don't do the work, we're going to look up in a short period of time and find out this country has fundamentally changed.
It's interesting, this question of people who had an awakening in 2020, because it's hard. I would say personally for me, I'm always like, if it took till 2020 for you to be, then I don't know that you're, like, I don't have a lot of faith personally. And so how do you keep faith that people could have been like somehow magically blind to everything prior to 2020, prior to George Floyd, And then, how do you allow yourself to believe that there's still opportunity for transformation there when so much has been ignored before that?
I mean, can I get
That's a longer way of phrasing optimism.
No, because I've seen it myself. Like, I have not.
You didn't believe racism existed before?
No, but in other side, I was pretty sure racism existed. But like, I lived in Chicago. I think I knew one gay person when I moved out here when I was 23, and like it was like, and everybody was like, she's gay. Like that was our conversation. I moved out to the Bay Area, and so I had the whole shift around LGBTQ plus issues. The fact that I say LGBTQ plus issues is a part of that. The way in which I think the number of gay friends I have and people in my life, it's like that shift. I felt myself go from a person who was like certainly homophobic in the sense of like, I'm not comfortable. I don't know how to talk to a gay person, to a person who writes a book with a queer person.
I know.
You know what I mean? So yeah, look at me. And there's I remember. Look at me. I'm one of the,
give him a cookie.
I'm one of the good ones, not like the rest. And I've seen it happen around other issues. A lot of this is about the Bay Area for me. Like I got invited by Jeff Chang, a great Bay Area author, and Fabiana Rodriguez, a great Bay Area activist and artist, to go to me and Nato Green and Janine Brito got invited to go to a culture strike, a delegation of artists who go to the U.S.-Mexico border in Arizona and learn about the border. I didn't know anything about that stuff. I didn't know anything about it. And that's where I heard that immigration activists called Obama the deporter-in-chief because he had deported more people than George W. Bush. I didn't know anything about that stuff. Right. So I have seen it happen in me as a person who's like, not, it's sort of like my friend Martha was like, don't compare yourself to the worst example. I think a lot of times we're like, well, I'm not a MAGA person, so I must be okay. And so for me, it was like, no, compare yourself to the version of yourself that you want to be. And so for me, like I've seen it happen to myself. And then just on a very other sort of personal level, my mother-in-law is white. That means I'm married to a white person, for anybody who's not sure what that means. My mother-in-law, who I met, who was like, we didn't have conversations about race or racism at all, was like, I need 4 copies and I need them all signed. And she was probably somebody who was like an Obama Democrat who voted for, but I have seen it happen. She sewed a pussy hat back when that was the thing. I've seen her get radicalized by this current version of America, and a lot of that I feel proud about comes from me. So I've seen it happen. It doesn't mean everybody's going to move at the same pace. Doesn't mean people aren't going to have a stop and start. But I know it can happen. It just isn't happening quickly enough.
Yeah, I mean that's well-earned skepticism that you have there, and I agree. Like I it makes me think, oh my God, there was like a headline in the New York Times a couple days ago of about these conservative Jewish leaders who, after Trump's dinner with the head white supremacists, were like, maybe not Trump, right? I'm like, oh, and it took you until now? Really now? Okay, right? So yeah, similarly, really, it took you until 2020 to, that's really, so I mean, what I'd say to that is, again, not like an optimism. I don't think that all those people that had that awakening have transformed. I mean, it's pretty obvious that they haven't. But I do believe that people can learn and that people can grow. And I think that ideas and beliefs can shift. And I think that, so yeah, and ultimately what really matters, right, is people's actions, right? Again, your Instagram posts really don't actually mean much, right? What what matters is how people are acting and what people are doing and how consistently people are acting and how consistently people are showing up and how consistently they're actually making a continued effort to learn, right? Because you don't just have an awakening and realize a bunch of stuff and then you're good, right? It's actually that should be the first thing that happens and in a ongoing journey of trying to learn.
Right.
So I think some folks are still doing that. I hope.
And I think there's enough people who want to learn. I trust in that fact. Again, I'm not trying to get everybody either. And I don't think trying to get everybody is a worthy cause. I think it's about this sizable portion of people who feel like whatever their life is fine. There's a lot of white people. they know something's wrong, but they also just have no way to engage with it. And it's like about feeling like what your role is in this. And my role is to try to figure out how to get those people ways to engage. So part of that is like being on the board of Donors Choose. Forget about like, we're not going to talk about racism. We're going to talk about getting school kids what they need. And some of that is around equity and some of that is about racism. But I'm going to get, but don't you think school kids need to have lunch and have snacks and have all the supplies they need?
And go on.
No,
please.
I've talked enough.
Well, but, I think with that, like, one thing we did in this book, your first assignment in this book is that you open up the book and there's a poster that you pull out that says "End White Supremacy," right? And it's got a perforated line, and then you read them. It's got a thing on the back, and it tells you like, okay, your first assignment is here. Take out this poster and put it up somewhere really visible, right? Maybe it's your office, maybe it's your apartment window, maybe it's your dorm room, whatever, and also like FYI, like, that's not everything. Like, that's just a sign.
That's page
right?
one. That's
like,
page one.
Like a stop sign doesn't mean anything if you don't stop. Like, it's just a sign. But it's your first step, right?
Yeah.
But when we were putting this book together, we actually initially were going to have the sign say Black Lives Matter, and then at some point we were like, that's actually just not enough right now. Like,
we see those signs everywhere.
We already like those signs have become kind of normalized in some. Let's be clear, in some communities,
Was that love,
right?
laugh, life, those signs?
Yeah.
Right?
Live, laugh, love.
And
it's become
Live, laugh, love. Yeah,
yeah. So like for us, it was like, so to think of people with having this awakening, like, okay, you had the awakening, like, what do you need to be pushed a little further, right? Like, what can we do? So for us, I think putting, having that poster be like, let's just go a little further.
Right.
Let's end white supremacy, and let's see how comfortable, like, you got comfortable putting up the Black Lives Matter sign. Like, are you comfortable displaying this? Like, are you comfortable?
Right. Yeah, and because even that sign, even though it's page one, for a lot of people that probably represents like it's pretty loud.
Yeah.
It's kind of like negative, it's a little anti-white. It's a little like, do I want my uncle to see this or my neighbors to know that I'm like,
And if you're afraid to do that, then you've learned something about yourself.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Or about your situation, or about your community, or about your the situation you're in. But it does make me think a lot about relationships in general. Whenever harms have been committed, and I think we've all probably committed a harm and had a harm committed upon us by people that we are in continued community and relationship with. And one of the things that becomes necessary in order for that community to continue to coexist is there needs to be healing and repair. And I wonder how you held the notion of repair of harm when you were thinking of this book, right? Like, what does it mean to, because like if I always think of the example, like, if a tornado tears up your house, it's not just enough to be like, isn't it great that the tornado's over? You now have to repair the house. And so I think a lot about the harm that collectively exists now from all of what's happened. So even if every white person today and every person who ever committed harm, or every man, were to suddenly from tomorrow just be like, from now on, no more misogyny, never doing another patriarchal thing again, I'm done. Still, there's a lot of repair that needs to happen, and I wonder how you guys thought about that notion when you were working on this book.
I mean, so I think that, I have to quote, as Kate has heard me do before, the prophet Daniel Tiger. The parents know what I'm talking about, who has the song saying I'm sorry is the first step, then how can I help, which we sing in my house every day. And so for me, this book is about if the I'm sorry is like the very first beginning step of this, but this book is really focused on action and really focused on different types of action. So it's not just about writing a big check, but sometimes if you can, write a big check. But it's also like writing the big check is not doing everything. So it's really like, there's a part in the book where in the beginning of the book we say, look, we're going to lead you through a lot of activities and ideas and puzzles, but if you just want to get to the big list of actions you can take, that's in the back of the book, and it's a huge fold out of the big list of actions you can take. And so for me, I think about it like, it's like if you read a book about working out, you haven't really worked out. So if you just read this book, you haven't really done the work. And I think the important thing, the thing that I want people to take away from this, that I think is like, anti-racism is a verb. You got to do it regularly, and you got to raise the stakes, because if you like run a mile every day, but you just run a mile and you do it in the same time, you're not going to get better or faster at running a mile. You have to up the stakes of, are you running faster? Am I running uphill? I don't run at all, as you can tell. So you have to get to a sense of like how to raise the stakes. And I know that from my own life, what that means. So like I feel like, okay, if you look at United Shades episode 1 to this season, you can see that guy's like, so this thing, we still have racism, huh? All right, let me try this. So episode 101 is me meeting the KKK. We did an episode this year where I sat down with Kimberly Crenshaw, who's literally the person who's one of the people came with critical race theory. So it's like, I don't think talking to the Klan's going to do it. So I'm like, I'm always trying to raise the stakes personally of how I engage with the conversation and how I bring the audience along. So I think it is definitely about the reparations. It is not just about the apology.
And, I think I thought a lot about that with this book, and I think a lot about that in general, about repair and about harm. Again, I think about that a lot as a parent, but I also think about it a lot with white people, right? Which is the understanding of, how to repair, how to get out of your own way and get over yourself and your own feelings about it. And I think that in this book we did try. I think one of the fine lines that we were walking was also. Like not wanting to be coddling, right? But also not wanting to be too like strident, right? Like wanting to acknowledge and really kind of validate people's complicated and difficult emotions and feelings around talking about race and racism and white supremacy, including the feelings of white people, right? And this is like, that's really delicate because we have so much white fragility and like the white tears and right, and like wanting to not to center white tears and white emotions around this, but also not to completely erase the fact that they exist.
Well, that's sort of, to me, is like the key thing about this book, is that everyone, if you have caused harm, you need a space to process your stuff. That space probably shouldn't be in the same room with the people that you harmed. And so that's one of the tricky, those things need to coexist. So that's one of the tricky things about this book is that it feels to me, if I was a white person, I'd probably need to do a lot of talking about stuff. Because I would have been at this racism thing a long time. And so, but you're making a book that is in public, and I just wondered, I mean, this is kind of what you're getting at, but I wondered whose space you consider this, the book, like whose space is it?
Well, that's good.
So what do you mean? What do you mean exactly? Whose?
Damn,
space?
don't make me say it because it was so good the first time.
It was so good.
I just didn't know what it meant.
But then I was like, it turned into like a Zen koan. I'm like, what? I mean, for me, this is I don't know if this is definitely a book about community. I don't think doing this book by yourself is really going to do as much as if you do it with other people.
Interesting.
I think there's an aspect of this where we do, and we have partner activities in the book, and we say find a friend, or we say act out this thing. So I think for me, we're not going to end racism as individuals. We're not going to dismantle white supremacy as individuals. It has to happen in community. And I think this book is encouraging of you building community in ways that maybe you hadn't before you picked up this book. So I think about my mother-in-law has 4 copies of the book. I hope that means she's doing it with 4 people in her life, friends of hers, because those people who don't normally have conversations about race and racism and don't normally think about what actions can we take need to do that in community. It's not something you can do by yourself.
Right.
And I think, I hear you with that question, and I think that idea of like going and processing all of your hard feelings, but like being conscious of where you're doing it and who you're doing it with and who you're doing it in front of. I think that we try in this book to do a lot of also like directing people out of the book, not just in terms of like, actions you can take, but other things you can read or things you can listen to. So we have a lot of little kind of like insets in different sections. It's like, to learn more, check out this book. Like, actually, you know what? Because we have a section about apologizing, right? And how do you actually, what is a real good apology? Like, I'm not an expert on that. Like, go read this book on apology. Like, go read this book on like, on somatic trauma and racism. Like, there's so many, we're not the experts in so much of this. And so I did really want to try to redirect people as much as possible and I think of those things as potential spaces for people to be processing some of the feelings that are coming up, like whether it's podcasts or books or films.
And the book is like by nature collaborative and has other voices in it.
That's what I was doing, yeah.
There's like over 50 artists who collaborated, artists, illustrators, and graphic designers, all of whom are artists of color or Black or Indigenous.
Yeah.
So it's a way that even the book in its work is trying to make sure that like we're bringing in other voices from these impacted communities to help address these subjects. Because if you just hand it to a publisher and say, find me an illustrator, it's going to be an old white guy. It just is. And we wanted to make sure that was not the case.
Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me of, if you've like read Emergent Strategy, it's kind of like, it sort of reminds me of the whole notion of like, we're taught to think of everything individualistically. So not just like it would make sense that people would be like, yes, I need to go somewhere and heal my racism, and thusly go out and then be a beacon for the healing of racism. Similarly, we're taught to think of our creative acts as being solo acts. Like, I got the book contract, I'm getting the check. Never mind the fact that like every idea I have is from something that someone told me, or a couple of things, or me, but it's still my book, it's my name on it. So collectively as a culture, we have this idea of like solo independent stuff. And the book, I think, really works well to like counter that this is a group project. Racism is a group project. That's what makes America so difficult to begin with. It's a group project with 450 million people, or whatever the number is. It's a lot of people to do a group project with. That's why we struggle so much. But the healing does have to be a group project. And I guess I just want to hear you guys talk about how you carried this notion of community through the book as you were thinking of it and working on it.
Well, like Kamau said, we did, like, we put in our contract, the illustrators that we wanted to work with and the other people that we wanted to have on the team, we stipulated we wanted to have a Black woman in an editorial position. We wanted to have a Black woman as a graphic designer. And it wasn't, we actually had that written into the contract so that they couldn't.
They couldn't be like, we looked, we tried.
We couldn't find any, but also again, I think both of us in our work, I think Kamau with United Shades and I really with all of the Rad Women books, we are really comfortable relying on the expertise of other people, and like really actually excited about that and learning
and crediting them and paying them. Yeah.
So we did a lot of that. We brought in a lot of other people who know way more about us, and we also really made sure to include their names and to credit them. And to pay them and to give them space in the book. And I think that was a hugely important part of this.
Yeah, and a lot of people are like Fabiana Rodriguez is in here. She's illustrated. Dr. Nikki Jones from Cal Berkeley is in here talking about the history of policing. So there's just I feel like we both have these sort of Rolodexes, not literally because we're not from the past, but like we know a lot of people and have collaborated with a lot of people and have learned from a lot of people. And then you get excited about, I can put this person in here. I can, like Nikki Jones, I met at a town hall meeting in Berkeley about getting kicked out of a coffee shop, and then I put Nikki on United Shades, and now she's in the book. So it's this idea of like always trying to promote the people who you've come across in your path who you feel like are already doing the work.
Yeah, the design, the artwork is so important to this book. It's obviously essential. It's literally an art book. And I just want to hear you guys talk a little bit about how the work came about, particularly the fonts, which I was really struck by. They're so beautiful. So can you talk a little bit about that aspect of putting this together?
Did you see how excited I got when you said fonts?
Yeah, really excited.
Yeah, when it comes to fonts, I stand down. Hates on fonts.
So for one, we worked with our creative director. Our art director was Diane Holton, who's incredible, and so she's based in DC, and she commissioned all the art and all the artists in there, and then they're all people that she had worked with, and she actually works for AARP. She's always jokes she's like the youngest person at AARP. But her mission as a Black woman in graphic design, like a big part of her work is bringing in young artists of color, and so she has the Rolodex of incredible people. But actually, the font here is this is called Bayard, and it's designed by Trey Seals, who's a Black typographer, and his company's called Vocal Type. And he actually turns out to be a friend of Diane's. But I had suggested this, and he does different fonts based on historic civil rights activists, and he does an unbelievable.
Is that Bayard Rustin?
Yeah, so it's a Bayard Rustin font, and the font, the type comes from the signage used in the 1963 March on Washington, which Rustin was one of the organizers of. And so he's got there's a Martin Luther King font, there's a Chavez font. He's got an incredible amount of fonts, and he does so much woke fonts, really. But he does so much incredible research. But that was a big part, And we also mentioned it early on in the book. We're like, by the way, the font that you're looking at is based on Bayard Rustin, and he was a gay Black man and a civil rights organizer. And so at any level that we wanted to bring in other people and have everything have as much kind of meaning as possible. Because I think, to me, that was also about modeling, when it comes to this idea of doing the work, right? There's so many different layers and levels and ways that we can get at that. And I think folks might not think of the font selection for your book as being part of that.
Pick
but-
like Papyrus or something and just keep it moving.
no.
Comic Sans.
Yeah.
Papyrus and Comic Sans, the hardest to read book in the history of books.
So we're going to turn it over to the questions from the floor. I haven't had a chance to read all of these yet, so hopefully none of them are insane. But
Can I do a quick commercial?
please do.
So as we talk about doing the work, and I feel like a responsibility to do the work and always try to figure out new ways to do the work. And like right now, there's about, I don't know when this is going to air, but for the people who are watching online, the people in this room, there's about to be a runoff election in Georgia. I don't know if you've heard, and the 3 scariest words in the English language are Senator Herschel Walker. So I am doing a thing with a bunch of other moderately famous celebrities where we're trying to raise $100,000 for that runoff, and it all goes to activist organizations of color in Georgia on ground doing the work. So we're about halfway there to $100,000, and we're trying to do this in the next day or so. And if we do it, I and a bunch of other celebrities who are more famous than me, including Padma Lakshmi, are going to do the 1 chip challenge, which is this chip right here, which is like the hottest chip you can eat, and ruin my bowel intestinal tract. So and we'll do it online. So if you would like to see me hurt myself for democracy, please donate at 51seats.com. 51seats.com. There we go. That's my commercial.
Oh, good plug. There's a chip in there?
There's a chip in here that you have to use like gloves to take out of here.
Yeah.
It's like you can't get it on your fingers, but you're going to put it in your mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. For democracy.
For democracy.
Yeah.
The things we do.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, this feels like a great way to transition to the first question. Are we making progress? That's it. That's the question.
In what?
I feel like this is one of those like I feel like very like President Clinton. What's the definition of progress?
the definition of
I really
is.
yeah. What's the definition? I think that way. If this was, I feel like in high school debate you learn you can't have a debate unless you know the definition of the terms.
Ooh.
So what's the definition of progress? And I think that like whatever we're doing, we're not making enough progress. So I think the idea of being like, I hesitate to say, it's just like when people ask me in the gym when I'm naked, like, are things better than I think they are? No, they're not. It's like, and so I think that like, there are definitely wins, and even in the midterms, it was like, yay. But I think if we're still going, yay, that's not enough progress. So I think that like, for me, that you have to, certainly we live, I assume everybody here lives in the Bay Area, lives in San Francisco. You can look around this city and see that we're not making enough progress. So I think that like I hesitate to ever say that like relax. Now that doesn't mean you can't take a break, sit down for a while, let your feet calm down, and then get back to work. But I don't think we want to say we're making progress.
Yeah, and I would also nitpick at that in a loving way. Whoever wrote the question, good job. But also like who's the we, right? Like,
Ooh, that's the definition of we.
Well, it depends on who you talk to, because there's a lot of out there that are making progress, and it's not the kind of progress that I want to see.
Is Elon Musk in the city now?
Yeah,
I just
sorry,
want to know.
I keep swearing, and I probably shouldn't, but I'm sorry. But it's it's the times. We swear a lot in this book too. We couldn't help it. But I think there's the I don't know what the we is. I think
That's funny. Who's we? Define we. Define progress. Define are.
Yeah.
Define making.
Yeah. And we woke up today. We all managed to wake up today. We all managed to wake up alive. We all managed to be here. We all managed. That's progress. We are literally, moving forward each day.
Well, it's interesting because there's another question here that actually
Smartest thing I've ever said.
Each day.
No,
it was your exhaustion at like each
every day.
We woke up again. Here we are. No, but there's another question here that actually asks, and I'm paraphrasing here, but what would happen if you replace the word progress or the word optimism with hope? And that makes me think more about, when I asked that first question about optimism, it's like, everyone says, no, I don't have enough optimism. Okay, but you got up and wrote this book.
Yeah.
So clearly you thought that it mattered. Like, to be truly without optimism is to say, like, I'm not writing a book because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No one's going to, everything sucks. I don't need to be here.
I think that's nihilism though, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that to have that is nihilism. So to not have that is what? Like anti-nihilism? I mean, that's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
what I'm getting at, I think the people who ask this question about, are we making progress? Is everything going okay? Part of that's because as a culture, we're addicted to happy endings and positive stuff. Don't get me started on the Hays Code. I have a whole theory about that, but I'm not going to go into that now. But we're, as a culture, we're addicted to this idea that like, we got to have proof that stuff is good and it's going to be good and we're good guys are going to win in the end. Otherwise, what's the point? And while I think we overly rely on that, I do think it's important to feel like the work I'm going to do is going to matter.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard, and it's hard to do if you don't think it's going to matter. And it seems like both of you believe that the work that you're doing, at the very least, has the possibility enough to matter that you get up doing it.
That's the possibility to matter. I think if you get caught up in the work matters, now you're in your ego.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So I think that, like, I mean, as you were saying that, I was thinking about, like, you know, people in Martin Luther King Jr. Day often do the I Have a Dream speech because that's a fun one. But, like, I think about that speech the night before he was assassinated, where almost the look in his eye was like, yeah, it's coming, everybody.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, I may not get there with you.
Yeah.
And when we talk about this book, often I say, whenever you talked about when things are hard sometimes, Kate, and I feel like when I have, like, man, it's so hard to do a TV show and direct a documentary, I feel like the ghost of Harriet Tubman's like, really? Oh, is it hard? Oh, you having a hard time? And so for me, I think perspective helps a lot in this sort of like, but I also think that, like, you have to believe the worth has a possibility of mattering, which is what keeps you doing the work.
Yeah.
And I think that, but you can't think that the work matters, because again, that's when you get caught up in your ego, and that my ego does not help me in that way. So yes, and also it's part and parcel. I'll take the black conch for a second, then I'll hand it back to you. It's part and parcel being a black person in this country that you have to sort of get out of bed and do the thing. Like, you can't I don't think we can really throw that responsibility away, especially those of us who are in positions of privilege like I am, I can't be like, oh, it's going to be fine, or, you have to sort of go, no, I have to do this work for the people who don't have the ability or the breath in their life to do this work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, I think while we're talking about Dr. King, I know I do have a lot of hope, and maybe it's like there's probably a lot of really smart stuff that's been said about the difference between optimism and hope. Sure. Right? I feel more comfortable claiming hope, but I also think that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, but it doesn't bend on its own, right?
Yes.
It does,
it gets bent towards justice.
Sometimes I kind of have I have an actual thing that I imagine in my head, which is that we're just like hanging on and forcing it to bend. Like, right. It's not naturally bending, and it has a lot of forces pushing it back. And I think when we do think about progress, and if we're talking about the progress that is like equity and equality and a world where everybody is free and loved and safe, it's not everything's happening all at once, right? Maybe it's that. It's like everything everywhere all at once, right? There are things that are happening that are moving us toward that, and then there's counter forces happening at the exact same time, right? Like, we have a number of the leaders of the Oath Keepers who are actually being convicted and being found guilty at the same time as, again, Trump is sitting down and having chill dinner with leading Holocaust deniers, right? These things are happening at once, and I think that we, and I think sometimes we get too scared that if we're making progress, then everybody will rest and kind of chill, and it's like when if I'm going back to this pulling on this arc, it's like when you're in the tug of war and you're like, cool, we're winning, and you kind of let go, and suddenly everybody falls over.
This might be the last question, depending on how long it takes to answer, but it's an interesting one. Was there any point in co-creating the book that you were at odds? Oh, yeah. And if so, what did you do to work through it?
People really want that to be the case.
I know.
They really want us to have had a really big thing, that I said something terrible, and then, you know.
Did you have to cancel each other at any point?
Right. No.
Cancellation.
I mean, it's funny. We've known each other for several years now, and we met. I sort of heard about the book Right American Women before I met Kate, and so there was already this thing that was this is a person wrote this, and Miriam illustrated this. So, and then she knew me through my work, and we've also as parents and as sort of East Bay, woke parent. I'm just going to use woke a lot.
Let's take it back.
I do feel like if we're not going to throw it away, I'm going to take it back. So like, yeah, I mean, the tension was in creating the book. There was not a moment where I was like, Kate, I can't believe you would say that about... I can't even think of a thing. Yeah. For some reason, all I had in my head were Good Times references, and I didn't think this was the crowd for those. So yeah, like I just can't. Like there was not a point at which we had I mean, yes, when we make the TV movie about the writing of this book, there will be a point where we'll have a.
You have to.
Yeah,
the writers will demand it.
The Lifetime movie about the writing of the book, but we were. It's. I mean, to me, it's like. And also, I think it's about the era, COVID, the pandemic hitting hard,
right.
Lockdown, Trump. Like you're watching the world burn down in real time on television. George Floyd. It's like when firefighters are putting out a fire. Did you guys have any beef when you were putting out the fire? No, we were trying to put out the fire. Right. You know what I mean? So I think that's how I think about it. We were so focused on the book and also the world, and just grateful to be able to have this thing that we could do and figure out while the world was burning down, we had a thing we thought was going to be helpful. There was not. I can't think of a moment of like, I'm not talking to Kate today. Like there was just like, yeah.
And I think we both really like to collaborate also. Yeah. And I think we're both really comfortable collaborators, and you are an excellent collaborator. And I think maybe there would be times where I'd have an idea and he was not entirely convinced, but he's so good at like giving me the space to work that out, and similarly. So if I came up with something that I was really attached to, he was kind of like, okay, well,
there was definitely
like, out and like,
I don't know what you're talking about, but good luck. I look forward to the Google Doc. You know what I mean? Like there was, I think that's how I've learned how to be, and you're a great collaborator too. Like I don't think we would have done this if we didn't already sort of trust that was the case. And also, I think we're both really comfortable in saying like, I don't know, or you take this one, or this makes, I'm confused here. We're really comfortable with the ways of communicating that that creates more collaboration, not less.
I'm going to just ask one more that has kind of been on my mind, which is how did writing this book change you, or help you grow, or what did you learn from it? Oh,
give it to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is a little bit of ego moment, but it made me feel really comfortable with humor. And which has not been a huge part of my writing. I mean, like writing a book like this with an actual professional comedian, like there'd be times when I would like think of a joke and write it, and I'd be like, and then he'd laugh, and I'd be like, oh, sweet. So
No. The thing that professional comedians do is like, that's funny.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
That's how you know it's really funny.
Yeah.
Say that's funny.
So I was like, that's really funny, Kate.
But no, so that
because you're a little bit angry that you didn't think of something funnier.
So that's, or even better.
Oh, so now you're going to write funny now. Okay. All right.
Even better would be when we were, because we wrote it so collaboratively that sometimes we wouldn't totally know who had written what. And so sometimes there's a few times where I think I wrote the joke, and then you would kind of like, you'd be like, oh yeah, that was good, I wrote that. I was like.
Really? Did I do that? Which one?
I don't know.
Okay. I mean, believe me, my wife, Melissa, a lot of times people are like, I love that thing in your act. And I'm like, thank you. She's like, I wrote that. So like, I don't remember that.
No, so that was actually my silly answer, but actually no, a sincere answer. And I don't know if this is something that necessarily changed me, but maybe something that I realized that was when we went on book tour, we did a whole bunch of events all around the country, and would get up and have these conversations, and I felt very surprised by the reaction that I got, in particular from Black women in audiences. That was a very consistent, and I want to be really careful here. This is not to say that every Black woman that came and saw us thought I was great, but I got so many Black women specifically like thanking me for getting up and talking honestly about being a white person and doing this work, and kind of saying, basically saying like, I've never seen a white person talk about it like this before. Like, thank you. And it wasn't like, you're so great, or you're really funny, or you're brilliant. It was like, I've never seen a white lady do that. Thank you. And I say that because that surprised me, and it pissed me off, and it made me, it reminded me and reaffirmed how incredibly low the bar is for white people, especially when it comes to speaking publicly or acting publicly or like conversing about this. Like the fact that like I just got up and did it and someone was like, oh my God, I've never seen that. Like that doesn't mean that I was brilliant or articulate or exceptional. It's just the fact that I actually did that. That was a real reminder of how important it is to just open your mouth and to talk and to acknowledge it. So that has stuck with me a lot.
I think the thing that has been the most satisfying for me is not the people who get the book, who the book was for, and who appreciate it. It's hearing from activists who I respect say, no, you actually did something here. Like Mark Lamont Hill, we talked to him in Philly, and he gave us this, it's one of those, he talked about the book in a way, I'm like, what book is he talking about? And there's been other activists who were like, and people who were like, I was suspicious, and then I actually flipped through it. So the fact that the activist community, who doesn't necessarily need this, even though there might be things in there,
and who is quite critical,
and who is
they've seen a lot of BS,
who can't wait to tear apart.
They can't wait to tear it apart.
And I knew that, and I respect that.
That's how you do it.
You tear it apart. But that there have been several activists who have seen the book, and I sent it to Kimberly Crenshaw and activists and academics who really appreciate it and feel like this book is doing something that other books in this space don't do. And then the other thing that has changed my life is all the various places I find it in bookstores shelved. That is I'm like, sports, really? Anti-racism is sport. We're losing. We're down by a lot of points. But that the people whose work that has inspired me to do my work actually feel like this book is doing something.
Okay. I just realized we're past time, and I was supposed to ask my question that's on here that I didn't ask. So I'm going to ask it real quick. What is your 30-second idea to change the world?
Oh.
Sorry, that's what they don't.
Oh. Yeah, please go first.
It says here, it literally says here, Kate, let's start with you. I'm just saying, it's literally what's on the script.
My 30-second idea to change the world is to shit about something and to be willing to take some kind of risk in your pursuit of that thing.
Boom.
Great.
You get full snap for
retweet. Yeah, it's the same thing. Set a goal to make the world a better place and regularly increase that goal. Yeah. That's it. All
right. I want to thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. Our thanks to Kamau Bell and Kate Schatz, authors of Do the Work, an anti-racist activity book, and especially thanks for all of you guys tonight. We encourage everyone to buy a copy of Do the Work here or at your local bookstore, including Marcus Books in Oakland, the oldest black-owned bookstore in the country. If you'd like to watch more programs or support the Commonwealth Club's efforts in making both virtual and in-person programming possible, please visit commonwealthclub.org/online. Thank you, and take care. Have a good night.
Thank you, Phil.